Can I call everybody to order? We have quorum now, and I'd like to get started. We have a lot more to do. So if the councillors, committee members can have their seats, we can begin dealing with the next budget briefing note. Okay, Josie, it's all over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, I think we left off on page 34 on the issue of the unmet demands. I think all the questions were answered. That is a doubling if we add 10,000 more spaces. Page 36, briefing note number 18, was a request to what would be required to address unmet demand for Swim to Survive. So we do have funding in the budget in the list of unfunded items that would move this forward into the next phase of Swim to Survive. And I believe that there is still outstanding amounts in future years, 19 to 21, to continue that work to get to the end goal of having 22,000 participants annually by 2021. So the value for this year is it's $156,000, and it's in your list.
Questions? Councillor Campbell.
Just, in terms of the location of the programs, are most of them in the run in the old former City of Toronto? Are there any Swim to Survive programs in Etobicoke or Scarborough?
Through the chair, yeah, the programs occur across the city. In fact, many are taking place at facilities like the Toronto Pan Am Sports Centre, which has large pools, the Etobicoke Olympium, and often kids are transported from schools to those centres.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Okay, next.
Okay, next one on page 37, it's briefing note number 21, again, Parks, Forestry and Recreation. This one is requesting information about what funding would be required to close any service levels, gaps, or deficits as it relates to the Parks Ambassador Program. In this case, the division has funding in the base, and there is a request to add 3 more crews of $350,000 per year.
Questions? No, seeing none. There we go. We're on a roll.
Ambassador program. Done.
Okay, next item.
Okay. Page 38, this is the operating side of the shelter support and housing budget briefing note that we already discussed in terms of the operating costs associated with adding the 3 shelter sites. Again, I think we've already identified that it's roughly about $3.8 million to run a 100-bed facility, and if we were to add the 3, it would require an additional $2.1 million in this year, as well as the debt servicing for the $44 million that would have to be added to our debt. That's $606,000 this year, and another $2 million next year, and another $10 million for the operation.
Questions? I think we answered most of them during the capital round. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we're on to page 40. Now we are turning to Social Development, Finance and Administration. It's briefing note number 23. So from City Council, there was a report adopted December 5th regarding the Toronto Strong Neighbourhoods Strategy 2020 and a request to report on what is the process, what would be required in resources to develop neighbourhood action plans for all wards and all neighbourhoods. So there's 2 components to this. In the budget, or sorry, in the list of new and enhanced requests, there is a request for $750,000 phased in over 2 years. In 18, it's about $226,000. In 19, another $524,000. That is essentially to spread the existing files across additional staff, so it's not quite as concentrated. And in addition, to respond to this particular request, you would have to then add an additional $485,000 for 6 new positions over a 4-year term to develop those plans.
Committee members first. Seeing none, we'll go to Councillor Davis.
Well, first, why would they be temporary positions?
Through the chair, the first group of staff that Ms. Levita referred to are permanent positions. It's the second request, that request asking what would it take to develop neighborhood action plans in non-neighborhood improvement areas or other parts of the city. Those are the temporary positions to create a team to go into non-neighborhood improvement areas to develop neighborhood action planning.
Okay, so when we went from 13 to whatever we are, 31. Were there any additional added staff at that time?
No, I don't believe there were. We managed that with the existing complement. We moved to a district approach and also grouped neighborhoods where possible in order to manage the increase.
So, for instance, the priority neighborhood, that is the Taylor Massey neighborhood, became the Crescent Town, Oak Ridges, so it got expanded, and that person also had Parkdale and Regent Park or something like that.
That's correct.
So the workload was doubled the last time when we expanded neighborhoods.
The workload for each community development officer increased.
So this is intended to create one CDO per neighborhood? What would how many would we require if it was one per neighborhood?
Through the chair, the first request that, as Ms. Levita indicated, is in that 43 million number.
Okay.
Is to provide increased staffing to deal with the 31 neighborhood improvement areas, to address some of the pressure I think you're referring to in terms of the increased workload per community development officer. So there is a request over 2 years for 5 staff to enhance the existing team for the current work. And that's in the 43 million.
Okay.
As requested, I was asked to report back on what would an approach be creating action plans in other parts of the city, and that's the second part of the briefing note number 2 on page 2. Would be to create a team of 5, basically a SWAT team that could go in and work with neighborhoods.
Right, and I think that was Councillor Mihevic's.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that's it. Councilors, I just wanted to bring to your attention, we're going to be hitting them shortly, briefing note number 31, Office of the Treasurer, and briefing note number 33 from the AG. There are 2 confidential attachments, so if you could put, I don't know if you've reviewed them yet, but as we get to them, if there is any questions in camera, we would have to go into camera. I would suggest we'll have to figure out near the end of the day. Can you just review them if you haven't, to see if there are any questions on that may have to go into camera on those 2 particular items as we get.
Questions on the purple sheets that or on.
We did that already. We've already done that.
You went in camera?
Yes. So now we're.
I guess I missed one day.
So if there's any questions as on those 2 briefing notes that we need to go in camera, because we'll be getting up to them shortly.
Oh, I do want to.
Yes, there's confidential information on those 2.
Mr. Chair, I would like to go into camera for this.
Which, okay, we'll figure out when.
Whether today or the next day, you know.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, next briefing note.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we're on page 41. There were 2 other requests of Social Development Finance Admin Division. One regarding the development of social procurement policy, as part of the poverty reduction strategy and what would take to do that work. And the second on the implications of Bill 148 on our CPIP grants. These will be coming to our next meeting. They are not before us, so we will get them on the 23rd when we reconvene. So that's it for Cluster A related briefing notes. Now we're on page 42, and we have 3 of them as it relates to municipal licensing and standards. So the first one is briefing note number 7. That was distributed December 11th, and it deals with the staffing complement required for the enforcement of holistic centers and body rub parlors. And so what's been identified is in order to strengthen that, they would need to add 5 additional staff at a cost of $682,000. What was also requested was to identify any funding sources, and essentially what the general manager is identifying is that since there's a cap on the number of licenses, that it's not possible to generate additional revenue, cover this cost from those licenses unless you eliminate the cap. You use tax funding, of course, as one of the other options, or we increase the fees, which are quite high.
Questions? No, we're good. I think we're okay. You want to move? Next item?
Okay. Next one is briefing note number 8. It too was distributed on November 11th. It's regarding what staffing resources would be required to enforce legal third-party election advertising. And again, the division is advising that there is no cost impact. They will be using existing resources, about 4 to 6 municipal standard officers, so that'll be deployed to deal with any issues in this coming election.
Questions?
Yes, within existing complement.
Questions?
I do have questions.
Councillor Carroll?
Yes. So if that is the case, then what enforcement pieces are these people currently engaged in, and what won't they be doing while they're dealing with the many neurotic calls about this during the election?
Through the chair to Councillor Carroll. So we will be using our municipal standards officers that currently respond to private property complaints, as well as our other complaints on the public realm from the Waste Division, Parks Enforcement, and or licensing enforcement. That's the way we've always dealt with dealing with the election sign period for enforcement, is we use our existing complement of resources and staff and reassign them to dealing with election sign complaints during that 25-day period leading up to the election.
But, and when you say you ordinarily do, is it in similar numbers? Because the reason this briefing, I can't even remember who asked for it, but the reason the briefing note was asked for was because this is a whole new realm of enforcement if depending on what the take-up is on using this sort of third-party type of advertising, could be a lot of work. So is 4 to 6 the usual number of redeployed?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's normally what we staff with. We've been taking a bit of a cautionary approach in this because we really don't know the volume of complaints we may receive about third-party advertising. We have over 200 officers within municipal licensing and standards that we can avail ourselves to should the volume of complaints get to such a number and we can't respond to them in a timely manner. We'll bring more resources in to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then we will be reporting back to council if necessary on the outcomes of the third-party advertising, the impacts it had, should there be any significant impacts to our levels.
Okay, but the regular sorts of property standards issues that they deal with, if extra resources are needed in various areas, that would happen too. There's flex here.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none, next briefing note.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the third one here for MLS is a request on what the breakdown of the revenue that was generated in 2017 from personal vehicle company fees So that's been provided. The briefing note identifies 8.5 million and breaks down the three drivers of that funding.
Questions? Councillor Mihevc.
Thinking not so much of 2018, but beyond, are we, and I'm looking only at the PC licensing fee of 30 cents per trip. Who am I speaking with? So is the bottom line that everyone who takes personal private transportation company, they pay 30 cents. First 30 cents comes, or second or third 30 cents comes to us.
So through the chair, the licensing fee structure is every trip that originates and ends in Toronto has a 30-cent fee, and that is remitted to us from the private transportation company.
Okay, so how is that? How does that compare with other cities? Are we top of the class, bottom of the class, middle of the class?
From our discussion, many have adopted similar fees and licensing regimes. In the U.S., I know there are some that are 20 cents a trip, 30 cents a trip, or some, I think there's even some that are higher than that. They've all got a variable of the same type of structure that we've put in place.
What's the highest?
I don't have that with me, Councillor. I can.
Is that a piece of work that we could do in 2018 in preparation for 2019?
So we will be reporting back with a broader report on the vehicle for hire regulations, and that will be something that comes forward when we do that broader report back. Certainly, that'll be a component of it.
Great, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Carroll?
So the numbers that we're looking at, these initial revenues, these are actuals?
So through the chair, you're looking at the three bullets, Councillor?
Yeah.
So the initial PTC application fee, that is for the company. They pay a $20,000 fee at application one time.
That's easy enough to track, so that's easy to project, but we have collected the 100?
We have collected because we have 5 licensed PTCs right now.
Okay, yeah. But driver fee, those are actuals.
Those are actuals.
So was that close to your estimate? We had a high degree of accountability?
Again, this is a new licensing category for us, and this is our first year of experience. So it is higher than what we had budgeted. We are monitoring this.
Yeah.
And again, in 2019, we'll be bringing forward more fulsome, once we have trends to follow on what
Right.
the experience is, and recommending or proposing any changes then.
Okay, I just had to ask because it seemed higher than what we argued about.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
So you're saying this year is 916,000 over projected, what you projected in terms of revenue, net revenue?
What we have done through the chair, Councillor, is in 2018, we've
Yes.
done a rate adjustment, a volume adjustment that will equal
Right.
the 916,000.
Right. So you're projecting 58,000 trips instead of 49,500 trips?
Correct. Again, given it's very new to us, we're monitoring those trends.
Right, so that is a very significant difference in terms of the estimated trips, even though knowing that, understandably, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yes.
Your report back was supposed to have been in the spring or in June.
So, Councillor, as we've noted previously, there have been other large-scale reports that have taken our attention, and so we will be reporting back. It's a large body of work that needs to be done, and we've started that work, and so I think it's fair to say it will be 2019 when we bring that full.
So one of the real concerns, because we did not put any caps on the number of licenses.
For PTCs.
For PTCs, and we opened the market fully 100% to them, and we have a cap on taxi licenses. We were going to look at their share of the marketplace to understand the impact on the taxi business, and now we're not going to do that report, but this, or not until 2019, which is late, this clearly indicates, I presume, that they're getting a larger share of the market than we anticipated.
So,
Is that
Councillor-
can I draw that conclusion? Or is that an early indication of more?
This gives us an early indication of the trends related to this new category and licensee. We are going to be working through 2018 with our brokerages now to try and receive and set up a sustainable submission of their data as well, so that when we bring the report forward in 2019, we'll have those comparables for both sides to be able to bring a fulsome analysis forward. Again, this is this is 12 months worth.
Now, the regular taxi licenses, how many of them have been turned back? We have a net, do we have any idea about regular licenses and how much revenue they generate?
The taxi licenses, Councillor, we've held steady. We've got about 5,200 taxi licenses out there. And in fact, on the driver's side, where we typically had about 10,000 a year, we're up to 16,000 drivers.
Yeah, not the drivers. They're not an indication.
So we have not had licenses turned back. And in fact, in 2016, we had a high of 170 plates that are called in the office, where they're held in the office for various reasons. They're not the vehicles on the road. Someone's sick, someone's...
Right, so the number of...
Those are significant.
You know what, yeah, that's another day.
last
I'll
question.
ask more about that.
Okay.
Next briefing note.
Okay, page 43, it's engineering construction services. The briefing note number here is 15, but it's actually 24. So briefing note number 24 responds to the request about the additional costs incurred by relying on outside contractors for engineering services. Briefing note number 24. And what strategies are available to address the issue at 18 and beyond. So this briefing note outlines, we're on page 43, and we're on briefing note number 24. It said 15, it's an error, so it's 24.
That's
Yes,
a clerical.
that's a clerical error. It's briefing note number 24.
There's no room for errors.
I'm
I do have the briefing note here on if anybody wants a paperless. I got it.
Any questions? So we're on Councillor Mihevc to begin.
So sorry, I was confused by 15, I couldn't find it, so I'm just skimming it and maybe embedded in here. So the math here, though, does suggest that we might want to increase our internal strength with engineering services. Is that your conclusion with this report?
Through the chair, as the report notes, it's a delicate balance in terms of our position, in terms of strengthening our internal roster, if you will, as well as using external consultants. We typically use external consultants on multidisciplinary projects where it's a multidisciplines of engineering specialties. So far as the in-house complement is concerned, our concern there is that we have a fairly healthy vacancy complement, if you will, and we are working with human resources to see if there can be reconciliation of some of the salaries that are paid to some of the higher specialty positions where there is a very competitive market right now within the construction industry. And so that's what we're recommending.
So so that's here what you're recommending. Are there adjustments that need to be made to the budget to make sure that it is cost effective, but that we have that we're giving you the resources that I don't see any recommendations here.
Through the chair, we were simply asked to report back on the cost of engineering internal versus contracting out, and that's what the report speaks to. As I noted in the briefing note, that there is a reference with respect to our vacancies and our work with human resources to see whether or not we can look at compensation levels for some of our key positions.
Okay, maybe offline, but I'd be looking to get is there anything that we need to change in your budget for 2018 is the bottom line?
Through the chair, at this time, no. The work that is underway that we have programmed for internal staff versus external consultants is programmed in and accounted for through our operating budget and recoveries for capital on the consultant assignments as we felt necessary for 2018.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
I've only just read it. I had meetings at lunchtime. So basically, it says we're paying way more than we should for contracted services for some of the positions. And I think it says you're currently paying almost double for what it would cost to have the service delivered in-house for coordinator outreach and special projects, and the field ambassadors, who are the people who go out and deal with the public when there are problems. And I know that Councillor Carroll has gotten to know some field ambassadors.
Yes, intimately so.
Exactly. So this, you're saying you're going to be replacing those with in-house staff. Is that correct?
Through the chair, what we've asked for in terms of additional positions
Yes.
are the 2 communications coordinators.
And 3
as well as the 3 outreach coordinators or
Right.
field ambassadors, as we often refer to them in the construction field.
Okay, so what will the savings be by eliminating the outsourced work of these people?
As you noted, for the field ambassadors, the per diem charges for similar type positions is about double what we're paying currently. Now, again, it's
So the
salaries versus the contracted equivalent of that service.
No, what I'm saying is, if you're not going to use contracted services for this type of work, what are the savings in the capital program that, by bringing that function in-house?
Yeah, as I noted, we would be paying twice the salary value if we were to contract out that service. So off the top, maybe in the order of $250,000 if we were to contract that out rather than.
No, but you currently are contracting that out. In all of the basement flooding programs, the water line connections, you are doing contracted out ambassador services, you're doing contracted out consultation. So I presume if you're creating these new jobs, the new contracts for that kind of work will not contain these people.
Through the chair, on a go-forward basis, the intention with these positions is actually to provide additional resources in areas that we've seen additional growth in. So for example,
Okay.
as you recall, the local road resurfacing program is now being delivered by Engineering Construction Services, and we need additional support.
Okay, so we're adding. Just finally, on the trying to bring the wages to a level that will attract people into these jobs, we've identified this for years. So when will we actually see the outcome of those reviews?
That's your last question.
Through the chair, I know that HR has begun their review or has done some work in the review, and I can't comment in terms of when you might expect to see a report forthcoming on a recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll next.
So, through the 2018 budget process, ECS is requesting additional resources to support delivery of the signed capital program. So the 2 communications coordinators and 3 coordinator outreach and special projects positions, are those, if we adopt those in the budget, are we adopting them under old salary levels? And so in Q2, you're going to come and tell us that those people haven't been hired yet, because why on earth would they come to work for us?
Through the chair, we're fortunate that in regards to these positions, we are, I believe, relatively competitive in terms of our salary bands. Where we lose competitiveness is on the higher specialization,
Purely
senior
engineering.
engineers and the highly specialized engineering positions. But we've been fairly competitive. We haven't had a problem in recruiting for the positions that we've asked support for next year.
So in these basement flooding and field ambassador positions, that's a different skill set, and that's where people say we overpay, so to speak. I'm not concerned about the money, actually. I just find that the in-house field ambassador is far more interested in being accountable to us. When the project goes pear-shaped and we need to have a meeting, he can actually be ordered to attend said meeting. Yeah. It isn't in here, but I'm assuming that the field ambassadors would, through ECS, be working on capital that is both tax supported and rate supported, so Toronto Water would benefit from this as well?
Through the chair, so those positions are co-funded between tax on behalf of transportation as well as rates on behalf of Toronto Water. You are correct.
And this gives us more people, but in turn, if I want to, are there people here from Toronto Water? Okay. I'm still working with Toronto Water in a capital project. If you turn the water off on a street, they knock on the door of every homeowner and the one and only caretaker in an apartment building, and the 500 or so people living upstairs have no idea why their water just got turned off. If we have these extra people coming in, is there any plan this year to also look at practices so that we might actually tell actual rate paying through their rent Torontonians that your water's about to be turned off for 10 hours, but it was a planned outage?
Yes.
That would be excellent. I love that, yes. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Next note.
Okay, we're on page 44. We're now going to begin some notes with fire services. So briefing note number 26 is a request around what strategy is and a recommended course would be required to address the concerns regarding the recent fire safety issues involving Toronto Community Housing Corporation. 26. Did I say something else? Sorry.
I thought you said 6.
No, 26.
Now I'm just paranoid.
So there's a briefing note here from the fire chief. What's been identified is a strategy around creating a permanent task force dedicated to TCH fire safety that would require 25 additional permanent positions, funding of $1.9 million in 2018 and $900,000 in 2019 for a total of $2.8, as well as a proposal to establish a fire safety education and marketing campaign, cost of $50,000 in 2018, an additional $250,000 in 19 for a total cost of $300,000. These are not in the budget and would be added to the list.
Questions?
On top of the 41.
No. Thank you. Next briefing note. Okay, I think we're okay, Josie. Next.
Okay, we can move along?
Yep.
Okay. Number 27 is a request from the fire chief on the impact of Workplace Safety and Insurance Board, or WSIB, and presumptive illness. So that's here before you, providing data to the end of November around the expenses incurred by this division, which are $13.4 million in 2017. We had actually added some additional funding to the base in 2017 to deal with it, but it was only, gets us to roughly $7 million. So, but we have maintained it at current levels, but they continue to see various fluctuations in those costs.
Questions? Councillor Burnside?
Yeah, through you. Sorry, what was the presumptive illness, the total cost for 2017? Just for presumptive illness part of the WSIB?
Through the chair, hard to distinguish, Councillor. The 13.4 is what we project to be our total WSIB cost. I don't have the ability to break it out as presumptive or adjudicated.
Did they not, through the chair, did you not give presumptive illness numbers last year?
Through the chair, no, it was presented as a total, Councillor.
Okay. Well, then I guess my line of questioning that will no use of going any further. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, Councillor Carroll.
No, actually, no, it's on the next briefing. Sorry, I'm looking at 28.
Let's go to the next one.
Okay, so briefing note number 28 is a request to report back on sick time analysis, so that is before you, and highlights that the sick day usage has increased by 7.3% from 2015 to 17, with much of it in Local 338. This does not result in overtime as they adjust their staffing levels, and continue on page 46 with some of the other highlights that are here. Noting that there is sick time that is being experienced related to mental health and wellness.
Okay, Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, so we still have the problem here of the 24-hour shift. So a sick day, we count the sick days as 8 hours. But so if someone has the flu and they're away for 2 days in human terms, they're actually away for 6 days, the way we count it, is one of the problems here. But it seems to me, before we started this 24-hour shift, we had like 10, 11, 12 sick days, I remember. So while there's an increase this year, we're still not up to where we were when we had real attendance management issues before instituting this shift structure. Sorry, I'm not into the mic. Yeah.
Through the chair, you're correct, Councillor. So we have a number of sick time or sick day calculation, and the way that we present it is difficult because we have a number of shifts that, all kinds of them that go from 8 hours or 7 hours actually through 24 hours. If an operations firefighter is off sick for a 24-hour shift, it costs them 2 sick days to take the 24.
We counted as 2.
And to answer your question, although our sick time has risen slightly from, or I think it said 7.3% since 2015, the total is still lower than it was pre-24-hour shift.
Yeah, I can remember budgets long ago of, in the 12-day range, and that was when we started looking at things. So quite apart from the flu, we have outstanding in the new and enhanced. This was a banner year for you. The firefighters came and they didn't say a single bad thing about the chief or his budget. They only wanted one thing, which was to do with mental health and wellness. And it's a pretty small price tag. Is there a way to get that program off the ground this year, given that the price tag of it, if it was less than $100,000, was that starting it part the way through the year, and so I'm only looking at a few months' salary? Is that why it's so low, just to get a mental health and wellness project started?
Through the chair, you're referring to the Road to Mental Readiness, or R2MR program, Councillor.
Yes.
The reason, I believe it's 92,000, or we're just checking.
Right, I knew it was under 100.
That's continuation funding. We started the rollout of R2MR this year. It's a program that's operated by the Canadian Mental Health Commission, and at their direction, it starts from the top of the leadership pyramid and works down. So in 2017, we completed that training for all of our people up to and including the district chief level.
Right.
The additional funding will simply allow us to roll that program out over 2018 and partially 2019 to all of our captains and firefighters on the job.
Right. So this is a continuation of something that's already started, and if you don't do the captains, then the people who are really going to be the first to hear that someone is unwell and needs help, the captains won't have been trained. So there wouldn't have been much point in training you, for instance, because you're not the first person they're going to tell.
Through the chair, again, at the direction or the recommendation of Canadian Mental Health Commission, we actually train everyone in a leadership position first. It's an 8-hour training program for leaders and a 4-hour training program for first responders.
Yeah.
The reason for that, the additional leadership training is to provide the leaders and officers on the job with the ability to recognize signs and symptoms and to understand how to address how to deal with it when someone comes forward and asks for help.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Mihevc.
Sorry, it's not in. It's related to your department employment systems review inclusion plan. Is that basically the trying to become a diverse workforce? That's what that is? Can you describe what that buys us?
Sure. Through the chair, the employment systems review, Councillor, is the body of work or the scope of consulting work that we were asked to move forward by Community Development and Recreation Committee. So that is a sum of money to retain a qualified consultant, to have that consultant come into Toronto Fire Services and analyze not only our recruitment processes, but all aspects of TFS operations and TFS environment for the primary purpose of establishing or identifying things like systemic barriers and any issues we may be unaware of that are contributing to any type of negative environment within the service.
Great. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Councillor Nunziata.
Just a question on the green sheet. on page 47, the top of page 47, briefing note 29. So the annual cost to maintain Station 335 is approximately 2.7 million, or 4,500 per...
I think you're on the wrong briefing note. That's the next one.
Huh?
We'll be doing that briefing note next.
Well, I thought we were on that one.
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay, on this one, Councillor?
Yes, yes. Well, on both, but yes.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
We're good? Thanks. Through you. So I'm a little confused about the conversion here. It says, for the purposes of comparing 6 staffs with other city divisions, this data is converted to standard 8.4-hour days by corporate payroll. So are they just taking whatever number, are they basing the days on 12 hours and then multiplying out and converting back to 8.4?
Through the chair, it's simply a mathematical equation, Councillor. It's the total hours of sick time used divided by 8.4 to come up with a day.
So it's under 9 ultimately?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's fine then. On the briefing note on page 3, it says employees approved for long-term disability benefits have the unilateral option of remaining on sick time as opposed to transitioning to LTD immediately upon approval. So they're approved for long-term disability, but they, if I'm understanding correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're approved for when someone is approved for LTD, they have the option of just running out their sick time at 100% as opposed to going down to that 75%. Is that correct?
You're correct, Councillor.
Is that, I presume it's in the contract. Is that something that would be standard province-wide for firefighters?
Through the chair, it is a provision in the collective agreement. It dates back some time and involves a decision by an arbitrator. I would not describe that as something that's common across the Ontario Fire Service, no.
And definitely not common across the city. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next briefing note.
Okay, we're on briefing note number 29, page 46, and this was a request on a briefing note to summarize the service levels being provided on Toronto Island. So this briefing note highlights what those service levels are, including the types of responses that are provided on the Toronto Island, such as medical, fire, and so on. It also identifies at the top of page 47 that Station 335 on Toronto Island is staffed on a 24/7 basis with 1 crew, five firefighters each, so 20, and that the cost per capita, the total cost to maintain that station is $2.7 million, or the equivalent of $4,500 per capita compared to $165 per capita citywide.
Questions? Councillor Burnside.
Thank you. Through you to the, I guess, the chief. Do you maintain the same shift strength all year round on the island?
Through the chair, yes, we do, Councillor.
Okay. In the briefing note, it says the majority of incidents are June in the 4-month period, June to September. What does that mean in terms of majority?
Through the chair, through the period from June 1st to the end of September, the emergency incidents that we respond to in those 4 months amount to 65% of the total annual call volume.
Okay, and you have 171 calls, so 35% of the time, or 35% of your calls are in the remaining 8 months, which I did my math ahead of time, is 60 calls. Would you agree that's 1 call every 4 days?
I would, Councillor.
Okay. So we know it's $2.7 million for the station. For 8 months of the year, it's $1.8 million. And if you're doing 60 calls, that's $30,000 per call. Is that correct?
Sure, I'll take your math, Councillor.
Okay. And above on page 3, or sorry, on page 3, you said the per capita cost citywide is $165. On the island, it would be $4,500 per capita because you have 600 residents. But there are only 300 households. And if you take those 8 months, so per household, you said there are 2 people per household, $4,500 per person. The cost of providing service is $9,000 per year per household. However, you're only we can forget the 4 months because we have Center Island and all those businesses. So for the remaining 2/3 of the year, it's $6,000 per household by my calculation. Would you agree?
Sounds accurate to me, Councillor.
Pretty close, eh? So essentially, it's costing us more to provide fire services per household than they actually probably pay in property tax. Is that?
Through the chair, I don't actually have that calculation, Councillor. I'm sorry.
Okay, and this leads me to my big question. This is where it's all going. Have you thought of any other way of delivering the service?
Through the chair, we've had...
For those 8 months, sorry, not for the other 4 months, but for those 8 months, have you thought of a different model? Because it seems to me you have 5 firefighters per shift, and they're responding to a call once every 4 days.
Through the chair, we certainly have looked at this, Councillor. The challenge we have that we're obviously is very clear, that we simply can't get people there in a timely enough manner. There are 5 people assigned to the island. That gives 1 crew. That's the minimum number of people that we need to arrive at a fire and begin operations or begin a very quick rescue attempt while we are assembling additional crews from the mainland and transporting them over on boat.
I got one last question. Thanks, Councillor Crawford. So what the response time on the island, would it be comparable to the response time citywide?
Through the chair, the 2 elements of response time. The first truck response time is comparable, yes. The assembly of an effective firefighting force during a working structural fire would be significantly below that of the rest of the city.
Thank you.
Councillor Nunziata. There we go. It was just answered. Councillor Carroll.
So the one breakdown that I was hoping to see here is between the residents on the island and incidents everywhere else on the island, because while there are 335 responses, it first lists every incident with every visitor to the island. So what's the breakdown there? What percentage of the work they do is work with everything else going on in the island?
Through the chair, I don't have that specific data, Councillor, but I can tell you that of the total emergency response volume that our crew responds to, about 66% of those calls are medical. So reasonable to expect that likely a significant number of those medical calls, certainly through the June through September period, will deal with visitors.
Right. So, catching fire at a campfire, setting yourself aglow, etc. A bike accident with a pedestrian and things like that. So it's kind of hard to do the math. If 66% are not residents, to attribute all this money to households is a little unfair.
Through the chair, it's the operating cost, $2.7 million. That's the operating cost to maintain the crew there for the year. That's really the operating cost to maintain that level of service to the island and the occupants of the island at any given point in time.
Yeah, and this is a busy event park, and you're doing things in parks. If in a division that say has Sunnybrook Edwards Gardens in it or High Park Picnic Area in it, calls go up there as well, don't they? We incur the cost because basically if you're going to put out a fire, you're going to send a firefighter to put out the fire.
Through the chair, that's correct. And our response protocols are the same on the island as they are on the mainland. The only variance on the island, we deploy the single crew that's based on the island, and in the event of a reported fire, we assemble additional crews. We take them out of the South Command, so out of our downtown stations. They assemble, they're loaded onto the fireboat, and they proceed over. So if we have a working structure fire on the island, that effective firefighting force or that team fighting the fire will largely be comprised of firefighters that have been transported from here over to the island. Right.
And lastly, one more question. God forbid we have another flood. If we don't have another flood, we can go back to having big events, like having a concert on the island. Pardon the pun. Say Arcade Fire was coming back to the island for a massive concert. Your crew has to just be on guard for that entire function.
Through the chair, that's correct. That crew would be there. We also, through our event planning processes, and emergency planning processes for large-scale events. It's possible that we would up staff on the island as well. Not uncommon for us to increase our marine capacity and marine resources during those times, and we may in fact position or pre-position other crews on the island if the occupant load and expected attendance is high.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Next briefing note.
Okay, the next.
Oh, hold on, Councillor Mihevc.
Yes, to your knowledge, is there a EMS crew at the island as well?
Through the chair, yes, Councillor, there is.
They have how many folks, more or less?
I believe Chief McEachin's here.
Through the chair, we have 2 paramedics there 24/7.
No, paramedics and 5 firefighters. And your call ratio on an annual basis is?
We do approximately 365 calls or call a day on the island.
On an island, okay. And you do one every 4 days?
In that 8-month period.
Yeah, in the 8 months. We do, in 2016 was 171 responses over the course of the year.
And how many of them were fire?
16% is the average from 2012 to 2016, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, next.
Okay, we're on to briefing note number 30. It's the final fire one. This is a briefing note request to provide an update on the fire services transformation plan. They have 6 objectives. They're highlighted by each of the arrows on page 47. I won't go through them as I'm trying to keep an eye on our time. The chief can provide any update that you might want on any one of those objectives.
Questions? Seeing none, next one.
Okay, so that concludes briefing notes relating to Cluster B. We're now moving to internal corporate services. So briefing note number 10, which was distributed on December 15th, deals with Transform TO 2018 operating budget. So if I just may highlight, in the briefing notes, we've provided the full history so people have clarity about how we've gotten to where we are today. But I think the operative piece is that in the last year's budget, based on acceleration, we had $330,000 approved for 6 positions. 18 budget includes the annualized cost of that. We have on the list of items not included but for consideration, $2.3 million from this division to deal with the strategies for 18. It is different from the $6 million number that was reported. And the briefing note identifies there are various factors why. They are listed on page 51, including the fact that we had some funding approved last year. There's staggered hiring. They've made some adjustments to the approach on some strategies, some modifications based on external funding, and funding that's now in the fleet budget.
Questions?
I'll read the report.
So just a quick question. So the $6 million, we'd heard, a few of us had heard through the deputation process that they want full funding of the $6 million that was in the budget or was part of the plan. But in fact, I mean, and most of the deputants mentioned 2.4, 2.5. So can you clarify the difference between the 2.5 and the 6 million?
Sorry, through the chair. The $6.7 million was the number that was presented last January in the budget submission. And the assumption there was that it was a program that was advanced through a certain process to get to be fully funded over a period of 2 or 3 years. The 6.7 assumed that we were fully funded in 2017 and that the positions that would have been deployed in 2018 would have been there for the entire 12-month period. That's not the case. What the 2018 budget proposes is that we hire 10 people in April of this year, 15 in July of this year, and a further 10 in April of next year. So as we phase it in, by the time we get fully funded in 2020, we will be fully funded at about $7 million. So as we phase this in, we are going to be at the same level of capability that was submitted in 2016, at the end of last year.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Carroll?
So If we proceed, if we were to put them in the budget now, so that we've got the 10 and the 15, are we flagging for all the other partners? Like, if we fund it all, we're letting the Green Municipal Fund know we're proceeding on all fronts and expect a lot of paperwork from us, such that we very quickly start to see some of the big moves?
Absolutely. We have, and again, through the chair, we have started work on hiring the 10 people in April. Normally, we wouldn't begin until after the budget's approved, but we've got job descriptions done, paperwork is underway, so the machinery has started on that hiring process. So once we get approval, if it is granted in April, or in February, we'll be in a really good position to start. We've also been working with external partners. We know that the province, through the cap and trade system, has got a municipal challenge fund for dispersing the cap and trade dollars. We've got, I forget the number of projects, but over $250 million worth of projects from around the city, representing about $110 million worth of potential grant. So we're well underway in all of this.
So there's enough work to be getting on with for Transform TO for decades. Of the 10 and 5, how many are permanent and how many are temporary? And if they're temporary, under what terms?
They're all temporary at the moment, and under the terms they are
to the end of 2020.
To the end of 2020.
Okay, so you would be looking by budget 2019 and 2020, right, if the Transform TO overall package is successful and the partnership funding is coming in, you would come forward to extend them.
For sure we would. Just recall that when the Transform TO programs were submitted, there were 2 phases. An early phase that went to 2020, and then in July we got approval to go out to 2050, the longer-term strategy.
Right.
So the funding period corresponds to that short-term phase that we presented a year ago.
Okay, and last question. We asked this of deputants, but it's not fair to ask it of outside experts and not ask you. If we were to leave this outside the budget, if we didn't do this piece, at the very least the 2.5 of hiring, if we don't do that in 2018, what happens to the goal in this whole plan, which is 2050?
Everything slips, right? I mean, and some of it perhaps critically, because we presented information to council last year, which basically showed that we have a large gap. Council has directed us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% of the 1990 levels by 2050. And we take that as a serious commitment. If we are late starting, if we're deferred, everything slips. The other thing is right now, the 3 levels of government are aligned. This is a really opportunistic time to get going, right? And we don't want to lose that opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor Mahaffey, did you have a question? I can't remember if I saw anybody else's hand up. Okay, that was my mistake. Councillor Davis?
On the ones that are listed on the new and enhanced facilities and real estate, the net is 2.876. So is this really what there are others that need to go in as well, is that correct? If we're to fully implement.
Councillor, we're not really sure which table you're looking at.
Oh, okay. I'm on the
briefing note?
The little Bible.
Yeah.
That shows new and enhanced not included in the budget.
We don't.
I'm not sure I have that in front of us.
Right.
No.
Okay.
Marco?
You, Mr. Chair, that is the list.
Well, that includes more than just Transform TO.
Yeah, there's other items in there.
That includes more than Transform TO.
Okay. So, but all of these are the sum of, I see, yeah. Okay, beyond the paramedics, up to here. These are all of the items that the deputants were seeking to have fully implemented. There aren't any others embedded in other division budgets?
No.
Yes, there's just one under fleet.
Fleet.
To improve fleet fuel efficiency. It's just a little bit further down, Councillor. The top one says transform TO, 172.4.
Okay.
So that's part of the entire package when people are referring to 2.5 million.
Yes.
Okay, just these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. It compose what the community out there sees as full implementation.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next item.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the next item is briefing note 31, which is the confidential briefing note. I would suggest we just skip that
Councillors-
one for now.
Councillor Davis, you wanted to go in camera. Is this the one you wanted to go in camera on? There's 2 items. You would indicate, is this the one? I just want to make sure.
This has to do with the impact on counter and customer service function.
Okay, so we're going to hold that one down. Chances are we're not going to get to it today, so we're probably going to have to do that at the next meeting. We'll see how things go. Okay, go to the next one.
Next one is number 32, asking the city clerk to provide a budget briefing note on the number of councillors that rent constituency offices outside of civic centers and the cost associated with that, and the number of councillors that rent them inside of civic centers. So that briefing note is number 32, and it's before you. And it's described on the next page. In 2017, there were 11 councillors outside of the civic centers that had a related cost of $164,000 funded from the council general budget, and there were 26 councillors with offices in civic centers at a cost of $82,000.
Questions? Councillor Campbell.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the difference is that councillors who have offices in the civic center where a payment is made, the payment is made back to the city. So there's really, so then the net is 0. I mean, that just goes to, it's not.
It's like the leaf collection.
Sorry, can you just
If
clarify
I'm
that?
renting an office at the civic center, it's the city paying the city.
That's correct, yes.
And if I'm renting an office on, Dundas Street West, I'm paying, some landowner.
That is correct.
So sorry, how many, we have 11 councillors outside the civic centers, and it's $163,000. Is that a figure that, is that a historically, is a figure that has historically been, in that range? Is this something that's gone on for years and years?
So through you, Mr. Chair, there was a decision made, this is a policy decision made a few years ago, where to actually allow for this, as some councillors were experiencing issues with having offices outside of City Hall. And so there was a decision, I think, through a budget process that it be charged to this budget. And at the time, there was some funding provided, but I think it was based on an estimate because we didn't know how many people would actually have them, and I think there was about funding for about 3.
Do we know, I guess we have a breakdown. Is there a cap on the amount that a councillor can spend on their non-civic center out of City Hall office?
Yes, so the policy that was established puts, at the time, an $18,000 cap per year, and there's an inflationary adjustment on that amount.
So the most expensive councillor's office outside of City Hall is $18,000.
It's over $18,000, but under $19,000.
Oh, so the cap is 18, but somebody's breached the cap.
No, sorry, the cap established in 2012 was $18,000 as an inflationary adjustment on that $18,000.
And the maximum now that somebody's spending is $19,000.
It's not quite 19,000, but
Okay, thank
it's
you.
getting there, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors in the committee? Nope. Councillor Davis.
All those Etobicoke offices that were once touchdown offices, now actually offices dedicated to councillors that they are paying for out of their budgets?
Yes, in the Etobicoke Civic Center, you're asking?
They are all civic centers.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
There are some touchdown spaces, and there are some spaces that are used by specific councillors, and they are paying rents associated with those if they're dedicated spaces.
And every councillor has a second office in their respective civic center If they want it.
If they want it, it's a choice, but not all councillors do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we got about
Right.
a half hour at the most because we still have to do briefing note motions, so.
Okay, so the next one is briefing note number 33, bottom of page 52. This briefing note is a request from the Auditor General to report back on savings from items identified in her presentation. It has a confidential attachment. So the briefing note is a public document. If there is a discussion on the confidential attachment, this too would have to go in camera for discussion. So we decide whether we proceed.
Questions? Questions? No, we're good on that one.
All right. Next one is budget briefing note number 34, for the MOH to report back on some details around student nutrition program as it relates to the number of secondary schools, elementary schools, Toronto District School Board schools, and Catholic School Board schools. So that's all here. It's itemized on page 53 in the response. Gives you that list as well as some other information if MOH is here to answer any questions.
Questions?
Okay.
We're good.
Number 35 is
Keep going.
the Chief Librarian asking what would it take to fully fund the library's open hours plan beginning in 2019. So the briefing note is here. The budget, as we know, with an item, has an item in the list of items not funded that forms part of the poverty reduction for this year's installation. So that's $574,000 to be considered. If that were assumed to be funded, then in order to complete the plan over the 4-year period, would require $3.4 million each year starting from 2019 to 2022.
Councillor Carroll.
So we heard from the employee group on this one at the deputation. They said it's basically an okay budget, except that you're losing 4.5 equivalent FTE. So if this open hours plan were to be added back, then that proposal in the budget, because of the way their staffing is structured now, it's purely librarians and pages. So the way they're structured now, if we were to put the open hours start off into the plan, you'll likely need those 4.5 FTE in hours just to staff. Would that be the case?
The funding, as shown in the briefing note, is for staffing, and so that would be adequate to provide that service.
By adding back, this funds would offset that proposed reduction in the base budget.
Yes, because this is an addition of staff, and that's a reduction.
And do we have, I guess you wanted us to consider it for equity purposes, you wanted us to consider it without showing us a list of the branches that would get open hours.
There's a lot of branches
Yeah.
that would get open hours under this plan.
Yeah, so that's not included here. Is there a criteria, since we're saying let's try to do some of it, is there a criteria you would use? Would branches in priority areas come first, some sort of thing like that?
As Joseph mentioned, our Sunday service request is the first priority, and that's part of the operating budget request for $574,000. And we would then, after that, we could put other priorities forward.
Oh, okay, but the Sunday service is basically the first part. I'm trying to read it as fast as possible because we just got here. Is that a part of the briefing note? Where are we pointing at? Oh, it's not so much costs. You know what? I'll just fully disclose. I'm trying to get to what is the criteria. One of the key neighborhood areas in our original priority neighborhood strategy was Malvern. And to drive through Fairview in my own ward on my way, having to go out to Malvern last night to pick up my grandson from basketball. I had to stop by Fairview Mall, and there's my lovely Library in the Peanut open at 9 o'clock. Well, open until 9 o'clock. Last night I had to go to Malvern, of all places, and at 8:15 that library was closing down. That just makes no sense. So if we add these funds, yes, there's Sunday opening, but the issue of homework and where are kids at night 5 days a week, is that priority one, priority two? What's happening next?
Our first priority is to open our largest and busiest libraries first because they're the most accessible. And currently, Malvern is a district branch and it is open longer hours than a neighborhood branch. But our plan has it opening even more hours. But at this point, Sundays are the most in demand. We've heard that over and over again, and it's limited service right now, and we'd like to expand that service. That's our first priority.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis, please. Oh, actually, Councillor Nunziata first, sorry.
Just I remember that I moved asking for a briefing note on the Sunday services, and I asked for a breakdown of all the branches you have.
Right, so that's in a second briefing note, the next one.
Oh, it's the next one?
Yes.
The youth hubs?
That's in the third briefing note.
No, but this is, are we not at briefing note 36? Oh, you're at 35. Okay, sorry.
Councillor Davis?
So the new and enhanced is to add Sunday service to 5 district branches, 9 neighborhood branches, at a cost of $574,000. And then there are annualized costs. But the rest of the
No, that's the total cost. We have additional 8 branches in 2019 and another 8 branches in 2020. Those are more branches.
Okay, of course, that's not an annualized cost. Right. Okay. How many in 2019?
8 more branches in 2019.
And 20?
Another 8 branches.
21, 8?
We didn't go that far.
Okay.
3-year outlook.
Okay. Okay, so, but the open hours dealt with the hours in the evenings. And at that time, we first approved that. When did we approve that?
In 2006,
In
plan was
6.
approved.
Right, so what you're saying is for 14 million, we could do the entire open hours vision, which was for, I'm not going to get in all the details, but it would be fair right across the system with the big branches opened a certain set of hours, including I think there was late night hours. There was going to be every regional library, every district library open for the same set of hours. In other words, it harmonized and made fair across the whole system the same set of operating hours for each type of library.
That's correct. Geographic equity was important for us as well as the NIAs were important for us. So we'd make sure that there is equity in service across the city and with a focus on NIAs also.
Right. So instead of building anything new other than in the real growth communities, the way to deal with growth and equity was this plan. That was the plan to achieve growth and equity.
That's correct. The board has maintained that 100 branches is the right number, and that the best way to meet growth is to reinvest in the current libraries through either expansion, renovations, or relocations.
Right.
And so that's...
And the best thing a library could be is open, which is, I think, the title of the...
Yes.
Oh, this is sad. I'm telling you, we've got to
Thank
get
you,
our
Councillor.
libraries open.
Next
I'm
briefing
finished.
note.
Okay, so our next briefing note is number 36. This is a request on the number of people utilizing the library system on Sundays, the breakdown for each individual library. So that is information that's been provided.
Questions? Councillor Nunziata.
Yeah, I do have, sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so thank you for the breakdown. That was my request. Now, so these are the attachment one are all the libraries that have the Sunday service now.
That's correct.
And the ones that you're in your enhancements, which ones are the ones that you're recommending?
Okay, we have that list.
Because I see some of them, the visits are very low. Some of them are quite high, and some of them are very low.
So what's the list? Okay, so the 9 new ones for 2018 that we've included in the enhancements is Sanderson, St. Jamestown, Thorncliffe, Steeles, Jane Dundas, Weston, Morningside, Eglinton Square, and Burroughs Hall, and they're all in neighborhood improvement areas.
Okay. Just wondering why it's so low. The one in particular in
which one is that?
In my area, Mount Dennis, that's pretty low. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, do you do a sort of a breakdown by a costing breakdown to see which, from an efficiency standpoint, cost per visit, or like some of these ones, I mean, I don't know what the staffing levels are in these libraries, but, as Councillor Nunziata pointed out, some of these libraries, the Sunday usage is not that significant.
So on Sundays, we do minimal staffing. We don't, so we don't have regular staffing. So we have basically, and we don't do much programming on Sundays, although there is great demand for it now. So there's a very skeleton staff we use for Sundays.
How would you go about determining that being open isn't worth the cost? You'd rather spend your money elsewhere. We do that exercise?
Sundays is one of the is the message we get every time we do public consultation, is that people want libraries open on Sundays. Right. People are changing their patterns of work, school, and play, and we feel Sundays is very much in demand. Per hour, it's our highest usage of any day of the week.
What's the busiest day of the week?
It's Saturday because we're open 8 to 10 hours, but Sundays because we're only open 3.5 hours per hour. Sunday is our busiest day when the branch is open.
What's the quietest day of the week?
Probably Thursday per hour.
Per hour, okay. Does the library regularly look at adjusting its hours per, in accordance to usage and demand?
Reducing service is not a popular issue. We do have bands of hours. Right. So we have 78 neighborhood branches. We have 4 bands of hours. Sure. And the bands of hours reflect usage as well. So the busiest ones would be open the longest hours.
I guess, so the question is, one of the busiest libraries in the system is the Richview Library, which happens to be in my ward. Yes. And it's a very large library that is reasonably well staffed. And I'm just wondering if the library system goes through the exercise of analyzing staffing levels versus, how busy it is and what the circulation is. Is that an exercise you regularly go through?
Yes, so we have a staffing model that recognizes all the activity in the library between visits, computer use, reference questions, programming, and so on. We know exactly what usage is. We know exactly what staffing levels is for each library, depending on how many floors are in the library and so on. So we have gone through that process, and we are in the process now of re-implementing it again, reevaluating it, and moving staff around as well.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm wondering if we still have and could dust off there was and would it even be meaningful, the original report that came with open hours kind of explained that the master concept there, if I can call it that, was similar to retail planning, similar to TTC planning, because Councillor Campbell is a commissioner, that if you decide you're going to be open on Sunday, you just, if all your stores are called Subway, they should all be open the same hours, because that drives customers to every single branch of your retail operation. And there was science in that report to indicate that the same was true for libraries. While Richview is very busy, and it's great that 14,000 people go there, there was a time when Fairview Library, which has 36,000 people go to it on that day, on Sunday, was the only library open for miles around. And so its visits and circulation is high and always has been high. But when we said we're not going to pick and choose, we're just going to open them all, that we got surprising overprojection and growth in every library and lots of circulation because you just plain knew that libraries were open on Sunday. And if you just knew that all of them were open till 9:30, you would also see more usage from that question mark time from 8 p.m. when some libraries close and 9:30 when others. If they were all open till 9:30, all their numbers go up. Is that still the case?
We recognize that their resources are limited, and therefore we have to invest where we get the maximum return for investment. Therefore, we do have bands of hours where we find we will invest more hours in certain locations and less hours in other locations because we feel that's the best use of staff and the best return to the city for its investment. So we don't have everybody open till 9:30. We don't think that's a good strategy.
But the consultants that came forward at that time at that report said, but if you're asking us in a perfect world how to generate circulation all over the system, people should just be able to know when libraries are open, period.
In an unlimited, in a perfect world with unlimited resources, yes, everybody should be open the same number of hours for simplicity.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Just one, we have about 4 briefing notes left, or 4 or 5. So if we can just be very disciplined on your questions so we can at least get through all the briefing notes today, I'd appreciate it. Okay, next briefing note.
Okay. Number 37 is the final one regarding Toronto Public Library. It's a request around the number of youth hubs in the city, their locations, hours of operation, costs, and attendance. So that's been provided. Just to note that now this is the 3rd year in the request to add to the number of youth hubs. It's part of the poverty reduction. It's on the list and would require additional funding as part of the $41 million.
Councillor Campbell.
Very disciplined, Mr. Chair. So these are obviously these are being received well by youth. 78% are comfortable, you know, in talking to coordinators and tutors and so on. Attendance is very good. My question is, in all of the west end of the city where I come from, there's only one youth hub, and it's up in Ward 1. There's nothing in Ward 2, which is Councillor Ford's ward. Nothing in Ward 3, Councillor Holliday's ward. Nothing in Wards 5 or 6. Why is that the case?
I don't have one either. I only have one library.
We are asking for more. As you can see, in 18, we're asking for 3 more, in 19, 2 more, and 22 more. We're happy to open more. Again, you know, we are being realistic on resources, and we're trying to prioritize our request based on having.
That's not. I get all that. I understand all that. That's clear. But I'm looking at a request for 7, and none of them are from the West End. So in all of the West End,
Mount Dennis.
well,
Mount Dennis.
it's Frank DiGiorgio's. Yeah. Here, I thought you just said you didn't have it. Anyway, sorry. So in all of Etobicoke, in all of Etobicoke, like there's like, you know, I'm surprised there's not one in Etobicoke Lake. Councillor, please. And I'm surprised that in Etobicoke Lakeshore there's not a youth hub.
Well, we focused on NIAs only for youth hubs, and I'm sure there are NIAs in those areas, but we've been very selective in asking for funding for youth hubs. Maria Shuka is in the west, maybe not as far as the Etobicoke, and Albion is in the northwest. So the west, we do have branches in the west.
There's one in Councillor Crisanti's ward in Rexdale. That's it. So you have 6 wards in Etobicoke, and there's 1 youth hub. Anyway, is this the point? I think it should be looked at. Made my point.
We're happy to look at it some more.
Councillor, any other questions? Seeing none, next item.
Okay, we're now moving on to TTC. Briefing note number 39 was a request of the Chief Executive Officer of the TTC. To come back on 2 items. Options to address bus overcrowding, providing the costs and the benefits, and the adequacy of the current bus fleet and garages to accommodate modest ridership growth and overcrowding. The briefing note that's before you actually has lovely diagrams to actually demonstrate or identify what overcrowding standards are, both for peak and off-peak. And what the briefing note identifies is in order to maintain at current standards would require $12.5 million, but there are not enough buses to do that. So they've identified another option of what would be required to sustain overcrowding to 30% on off-peak, and that would be a $4 million cost at $1 million this year, an additional $3 million next year.
Questions, Councillor Mihevc.
So just so I'm clear, we do have, just on the bus availability, we do have the buses for off-peak.
We have the buses. It would be the hours that would be required to do all of off-peak to bring it to
We have the
standards.
buses. So I'm just asking about, do we have?
Yes, we do have the buses.
We do have the buses. We do not have the buses for peak.
We do not have the buses
today. You will have the buses for peak if you extend the life of the older ones just a little bit when we start to have them delivered in September of this coming year.
That's correct.
Okay, so you, the $3.5 million for peak, is that a third of a year number or a whole year number?
That's a full year.
A full year. So to do that, to really do that for 2018, you could do a third of it in 2018.
Yes.
Okay, so that's about 1.2 million for 1/3 of a year. Okay, and then on the other one, given that we're into the year, you could do 9 million. How long would it take for it to be actually, if we were to give you instructions in February, given board periods and that, how long would it take to get implemented?
Just for clarification, are you asking how long off-peak?
To adhere to our loading standard.
To a loading standard, that would take us into next year, because we are already, in terms of our planning process, we are already planning the board period, the changes in the board period for April, and therefore, by the time the money becomes available, it would be round about September.
September, okay, so
Yeah,
September, so really, that's a third of a year.
Yes.
That $9 million, if we wanted to do it, if you started in September, so that we adhere to our standard, you could do that for $3 million cost in 2018. And noting that, of course, for 2019, you'd have to add 2/3 of a year beyond that. So total, if we really wanted to adhere to our loading standards, in the realm of doability, we would need $3 million for off-peak and $1.2 million for peak.
That's correct.
Great, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Carroll?
So, yeah, and this is a lot to absorb, but this 36 customers off-peak crowding standard that I'm looking at, do we have a breakdown of what percentage of the day are we meeting that in our major routes?
I don't have that available right now, but we could provide that.
But we're not meeting it for very much percentage, or is it just that I live in a busy area? I can't ever remember at any time of the day having a seat for everyone on either the Lawrence 54 or Don Mills Road. I just can't.
Well, as the briefing note indicates, we only have 118 periods, which is approximately 8% of our routes that are exceeding that.
Okay, okay.
So for most of our routes, we're within that standard.
But those would be neighborhood routes. As soon as you get onto an artery, that's where those 8% are those major routes.
There's a list of the routes that are affected at the bottom of the report, of the briefing note. That's on page 4.
Oh, I think I see it now. I think I see it now. Okay, okay. I'm going to confer with Councillor Mihevc, because I think he has a game plan.
Thank you,
Got
Councillor
ideas. You can
Carroll.
see that
Seeing no other questions,
circle coming out of your head.
Josie will go on to the next briefing note. I was trying to get through here.
Okay. So police services, that's, I believe, our final briefing note for today. Number 38, bottom of page 58, was a request to provide the uniform, establishment, and deployment history broken down by police division for the period 2013 to 17, projection for 18, and the number of officers on patrol at any given time. So that has been provided. There are some highlights here on page 59 of the wrap-up notes. That identifies that what is being provided in terms of patrol and the establishment versus strength.
Which officers by division? Okay.
Councillor Nunziata has questions.
This was my request on the briefing note. So, so the numbers that the table 1, the number of officers. So that's the total. That's a total staff complement in the division. It's not the officers that are frontline officers on the streets.
No, that's exactly, it's frontline officers on the street that work in divisions as well as our community response group. It also includes traffic services. So these are all the officers that basically work in a division and are responding to priority calls or working with the community. And so you see that the number is 4,000 in 2000, whereas our establishment is 5448. So it doesn't include homicide, sex crimes, ETF, and all the specialized units.
Okay, so if I wanted to know then how many officers in a division, for example, 12 division, that are on patrol in one single day, how would I get that? That are actually out there, like frontline officers that are on the street daily.
So if you look at Table 2, Councillor, that's part of the briefing note, it actually gives our best, and this is based on our officers signing into our CAD system. So you'll see it actually shows, and it breaks down by our 3 shifts, how many officers on average we would have on the street in 2017, or we had on the street in 2017, broken down by division and by shift. And so you'll see that if 12 division basically had at any point in time, or in the day, they had 12, 15 during evening hours, and 13 during night hours.
So in 12, okay, let me just look at this. So you're saying Table 2, so a total of 12, you've got 12 officers, you've got 12 officers?
At any point in time during that period of time.
Okay, but that's not what I'm getting.
Well, if you want to know how many officers then are in 12 division?
What I've been told, there's like 7 that are out on the streets at a time, 7.
So
that's 2 in each car.
That's an average.
So
what we're providing is the average complement that's on the street in 2017.
That's not what's happening. That's not what you have on the street.
Well, this is based on our people signing into CAD, and I realize that some of our divisions actually have fewer cars on the street, maybe 3-4 cars per shift. And we're looking at that in terms of trying to make sure that we have other avenues to, and we're actually have implemented other things that will help those people respond to calls.
Okay, I'll have to talk offline. But
Thank you. Councillor Burnside, you had questions.
Quickly, when you say you have that many officers, does that include officers in training, on training courses or anything like that, or just actually on the street?
So the Table 2 would actually take into account the fact that we do have training and people on leave and on sick. So that is included in that, is taken into account. And in the other table, Table 1, this is basically officers who sign into CAD, so that would include that as well.
That's one, okay. And the numbers you're using are, I'll say, data-driven. They're actually actual numbers, not anecdotal?
No, they're data-driven, and so you could have someone signing into CAD twice, which would throw it off a bit.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, so just to put this into context, the media was making a big deal yesterday morning of the fact that in the division where I represent, that 33 division is the division where the Barry and Honey Sherman's home is. And so they said that because the high-profile crime site had to be guarded, that there weren't officers out there. And that we only had 2 cars for the entire division. and that resources had to be pulled from another division. Is getting resources from another division when you have an extraordinary circumstance a sign of crisis, or is that just good deployment and management?
It's actually the type of thinking that we're now encouraging. We have to start thinking beyond our boundaries and actually avail ourselves to other resources. And we actually have the Toronto Police Operations Centre that actually does that, so that we're basically deploying our officers where we need them the most.
Right. So the point of having someone actually overseeing two divisions and really having a grand overview is to know where training's going on, to know where there might be a reason why we need to beef up over here, beef up over there. And if we rush some of the bigger components away forward, the connected officer and the tech pieces that go into the supervisory ranks, we're not only doing that now, but we're going to get better at it.
Absolutely. As we roll out different things and as people start getting used to the change, I think we're going to start seeing some real improvements.
Thank you. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. We're sort of really running out of time here.
I just wanted to know, on these numbers on Table 2, that are officers on patrol, does that include those that are on special events and redeployed for various special events?
So if they're officers that are from divisions, because we also have a special events section and public order section.
No, I'm just talking about like 54 Division, as Councillor Nunziata said, it says there are 12 officers on duty.
That would be patrol.
At night. Is that it? There's 12 officers on duty for all of 54 Division.
That's correct.
Okay, but I'm saying in the daytime, for instance, it says there's 12 officers on duty all day long. If there's a parade or an event, I know that those...
And we would supplement to actually deal with that special event, using our special events people or actually bringing in people on call back to actually deal with the event.
I always see regular officers at parades.
Well, they'll still be part of that as well if they can help out at the event, and it depends on the type of event as well. But certainly we try to use whatever resources we have to do special events, but keep our continuity in terms of responding to the city.
Are you able to take the parking enforcement or traffic enforcement officers out of here and show them separately? If we asked by...
I'd have to, well, parking enforcement is separate.
Sorry, traffic enforcement by...
I'd have to get back to you on that. We do have a traffic services, and there's about 300 officers in that unit.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing hold on, just one quick question on this.
One very quick question. In that shift survey, is there a 2-hour period in the afternoon from 10 until midnight where there's doubled up on officers?
We do have, so we do 5 platoons over a 3-hour, over 3 shifts. So there is sometimes an overlap between a 3 o'clock and a 5 o'clock shift. Yes, there is an overlap.
I thought it was to 2200 or to midnight.
We could do it there. It all depends.
Starts to the 8 hours to 6 o'clock. It looks to me, and I might be wrong, that there is a very clearly 2-hour overlap.
Sir, I'm aware of the one in the evening shift, but I think we probably also do it for those at the night shift as well.
The night shift.
Yeah, but we could get you that information to make sure that.
Yes, and so, okay, yep.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other questions, Josie?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, we've now concluded our discussion on all the budget briefing notes that have been before you, except for briefing note number 31 and number 33, both of which have a confidential element to it. And I think maybe the proposal is that they be dealt with at our next meeting.
Yeah, so what I'm looking at doing is moving a motion to receive all the briefing notes except for 31 and 33. We will deal with, now I know 31, so we'll have to figure out if when we come in camera, we do in camera on the 23rd, but we will do the in camera for 31 and 33. So, oh, excuse me. Everybody okay with that? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Do you hold not past the equity one? I just know that Councillor Wong Tam and others who are very specifically interested
Well,
briefing note.
Council, I respect that, but they had every opportunity to be here today to ask questions, and we have, I'm sorry, I respect that, but they should have been here today to ask questions. Just to hold it back for another day so they can be here, I'll put it to the committee, but they had their opportunity to ask questions today. Okay, so we're going to go to briefing note requests. I know Councilor Mahevik has one that has a number on there. I have one myself that I'd like to move, if I could. It's been circulated. Well, you know what, then maybe we should do yours first. There's no time for that. I'm not expecting this before council. This is just to bring in at some point to the process. So I think it's been circulated. I'm not going to read it. Do we have it up on the screen? It's there. Okay. It's to go back to the one, remember how we were doing the 1/3 and 1/3? The last 2 years we've been doing 0.5 or half of it. This is a report just to get back to where we were at the 1/3. This is well, Council, unfortunately, you're not on the committee, so you can't vote, so it's not really up to you. It's up to the committee to support this. You can moan if you want, absolutely. All in favor?
Hang on.
It's just a request for a report. There's no financial implications, nothing.
That's Francis. Hope. Francis is. It's mine. Oh, Dan.
Okay, can we hold this down then? We only have 10 minutes. No, I'm not, the intent is not to have it open-ended. It's to go look back at going back to the 1/3 or the. Okay. Okay. Anyway, why don't we vote on this? You can either vote it, support it, or not support it. Councillor Burnside, can you please come have your seat? We're doing some votes here.
Could you please give Francis Nunziata back her budget thing?
On this briefing note, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, Councillor Mahevik, you have a motion.
Yes, this is an attempt to consolidate a number of requests made by a number of councillors, and I'd ask it to, frankly, support all of them. Do you want me to go through it?
Well, what we're going to, now it has been advanced circulated, so I think everybody has a copy. I would like to vote on it ad seriatim.
Can I record that then?
Yeah, so this will be, I guess, it would have to be recorded. Okay. Do you want it recorded?
Yes, please.
He's asked for recorded. Okay. So number 1, all in favor? Opposed? Oh, so you're recording. I apologize. That's my fault. Okay. I'm part of this, Councillor, we have 10 minutes, and so we can continue, we can do the recorded, but right at 3:30, we can't vote on anything else, so it's going to be up to you to do recording on all of them.
Or maybe bulk a couple of them if you want.
No, I want them all individually, so it'll be up to you if you want them recorded or not.
Let's record them then, please.
Okay, so when we hit 3:30, if we don't get to them.
Okay, well, hurry up.
Okay, go.
Okay, on motion number 1 in the motion, all those in favor of Councillor Carroll and Councillor Mahevik? All those opposed? Councillor Burnside, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Crawford, and Councillor Nunziata. The motion fails. On number 2, all those in favor? I have Councillor Campbell, Councillor Burnside, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Mahevik, and Councillor Nunziata. The number carries. Number 3.
That was unanimous.
Yeah. Okay. Number 3, all those in favor? Councillor Mahevik? And Councillor Carroll, are you in favor? Yep. Councillor Carroll and Councillor Mahevik? Fails. Number 4.
We haven't.
Sorry, all those opposed? Councillor Burnside, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Nunziata. It fails. All right, on number, what number?
4.
Number 4. All those in favor? Councillor Carroll and Councillor Mahevik? All those opposed? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Campbell, Counselor Crawford, and Counselor Nunziata. It fails. On number 5, all those in favor? Counselor Carroll, Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Campbell, Counselor Crawford, and Counselor Nunziata. Fails. On number 6, all those in favor? Counselor Carroll and Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Campbell, Counselor Crawford, and Counselor Nunziata. Fails. On number 7, all those in favor? Counselor Campbell and Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Campbell, Counselor Crawford, Counselor Nunziata. Fails. On number 8, all those in favor? Counselor Carroll and Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Campbell, Counselor Crawford, and Counselor Nunziata. Fails. Number 9, all those in favor? Counselor Carroll, Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? On number 9, all those in favor? For number 9. Counselor Campbell. It's
Number 9.
on number 9, all those in favor? Counselor Campbell, Counselor Carroll, Counselor Mahavik, and Counselor Nunziata. All those opposed? Counselor Burnside and Counselor Crawford. Passes. Number 10, all those in favor? Counselor Carroll and Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? On number 10, all those in favor? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Carroll, and Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? Counselor Campbell, Counselor Crawford, Counselor Nunziata. Motion fails with a tie. On number 11, all those in favor? All those in favor? Counselor Burnside? Am I waiting for you to finish reading it? No, you're okay? Okay, all those in favor? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Carroll, Counselor Crawford, Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? Counselor Campbell, and Counselor Nunziata. Passes. On number 12, all those in favor? Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Camber, Counselor Carroll, Counselor Crawford, and Counselor Nunziata. Fails. On number 13. All those in favor? On 13, all those in favor on number 13? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Campbell, Counselor Carroll, Counselor Crawford, Counselor Mahavik, and Counselor Nunziata. Passes. Number 14, all those opposed for number 13? Passes. On number 14, all those in favor? Counselor Carroll and Counselor Mahavik. All those opposed? Counselor Burnside, Counselor Campbell, Counselor Crawford. Counselor Nunziata, how are you voting? Opposed? Fails.
Okay, I think that's it. We have 5 minutes left if we want to do one more, but no, I think we're okay.
Defer the item to January 23rd.
Oh, we also need a motion to defer the item till January 23rd. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We are now recessed till the 23rd. Yes.
Voted in favor.